This is the side you've never fully shown. Not because it doesn't exist, but because at some point you learn to hide parts of yourself. Impulses deemed unacceptable. Thoughts that don't fit the image you maintain. Music, emotions suppressed before you even had a chance to understand them. None of it went away, it was simply repressed beyond consciousness. Music, in Carl Jung's analytical psychology, this hidden space has a straightforward and disturbing name: the shadow. It's everything in yourself you reject, deny, or try not to notice. But there's an important point to this theory, and it completely changes the way you view yourself. Ignoring the shadow doesn't make it weaker. On the contrary, its influence becomes stronger, more subtle, and harder to control. What seems like self-control may actually be repression. What you think you've overcome may continue to linger in the shadows, subtly influencing your decisions. Research shows that what's repressed never goes away. It manifests in other ways, often through anxiety, self-loathing, and relationship problems. That's the paradox. The more you try to distance yourself from these parts of yourself, the more they influence who you become. And while you strive for an ideal version of yourself, an important part of your personality remains unaddressed. Unprocessed, unintegrated, simply hidden. What if the problem was never what's inside you, but that you refuse to look at it? What if what you most reject isn't a mistake, but a key part of your wholeness? What is the price of continuing to run from yourself? According to analytical psychology, developed by Carl Jung, the human mind extends far beyond what we can perceive. This is one of the theory's key principles. There's an invisible dimension, composed of contents repressed throughout life that continue to silently influence our decisions, emotions, and behavior. Within this structure emerges one of Jung's most provocative concepts, the shadow. The shadow consists of everything rejected during the formation of our personality, traits deemed unacceptable, repressed impulses, desires that conflict with social norms or the image we wish to maintain. From an early age, we learn what is acceptable to show and what must be hidden. And in this process, entire parts of the personality are excluded from consciousness. Not because they disappear, but because they don't correspond to the ideal self. And here's the important point. The shadow isn't composed solely of negative aspects. It can also conceal potential, talents, and strengths that were suppressed due to fear, guilt, or social pressure. In other words, by hiding our weaknesses, we may simultaneously be concealing abilities that were never realized. Therefore, the shadow is not simply a repository of shortcomings, but the uncharted territory of one's own personality. Even outside of consciousness, these contents remain active. Depth psychology shows that repressed content doesn't disappear, it merely changes form. It can manifest as diffuse anxiety, overreactions, repetitive behavior patterns, or relationship conflicts. One of the most common effects is projection, where a person begins to see in others what they don't recognize in themselves, forming strong and often unfounded judgments. Understanding this mechanism makes it clear. The problem isn't the existence of the shadow, but the relationship we build with it. Ignoring, denying, or suppressing these contents only strengthens their unconscious influence. And the further they are from consciousness, the more power they have over behavior. If what you reject continues to operate behind the scenes, how conscious are your choices really? Ignoring the shadow isn't simply avoiding inner discomfort, it's allowing it to operate uncontrollably. When repressed contents remain outside of consciousness, they don't become passive. On the contrary, they begin to indirectly and often distortedly influence decisions, attitudes, and behavior. Research in depth psychology studies show that such denial reinforces self-deprecation, suppressed impulsivity, and recurring conflicts with others. What is not acknowledged within tends to manifest itself externally. This process is usually unnoticed. It manifests itself in overreactions, irritation without apparent cause, hidden envy, or recurring patterns of failure and disappointment. It is not a lack of control, but a lack of awareness. Psychic energy associated with the shadow finds indirect ways of expression. And without integration, these ways are rarely constructive. One of the most powerful mechanisms is projection. Jung described it as the tendency to attribute to others what we cannot accept in ourselves. Repressed traits, music, are easily noticed in the behavior of others, but remain invisible to the person themselves. This is why some things affect us so deeply often. They reflect something that is within us, but has been rejected. Criticism of another in this case becomes an unconscious defense. However, Jung did not consider the shadow a problem to be eliminated. He saw it as an important part of the personality that needs to be integrated. Shadow integration is an active process of awareness. It involves observing your patterns, identifying emotional triggers, and re-evaluating automatic judgments. It's not about following every impulse, but rather understanding their source and what they reveal about our psyche. It's a shift from reaction to awareness. This path requires an internal confrontation with oneself. By acknowledging the shadow, a person confronts contradictions, qualities that don't fit with their self-image, desires that run counter to values, and emotions they've been avoiding for years. But it's precisely this confrontation that reduces the unconscious influence of these contents. What becomes conscious ceases to operate from the shadow. When these aspects are integrated, the very structure of our relationships with ourselves and others changes, rigidity diminishes, tolerance grows, and choices become more conscious. Energy previously spent on suppression is channeled into creativity, confidence, and personal growth. Self-sabotage is replaced by autonomy, and clears throat, constant conflict is replaced by clarity. Ultimately, integrating the shadow doesn't make a person perfect, it makes them whole. And this difference changes everything. Because when you begin to see what you previously avoided, a new question arises: if this part was always inside me, who am I becoming now that I choose to acknowledge it? Through this process, a quiet shift begins to occur. What was previously a source of conflict becomes a source of awareness. Integrating the shadow doesn't eliminate internal tensions, but it changes the way we relate to them. Instead of denial, observation; instead of an automatic reaction, understanding. And this, albeit imperceptibly, profoundly changes the way we exist in the world. Questions that arose along the way begin to connect. What seemed external clears throat, irritation, judgment, conflict reveal their inner roots. Projection weakens as awareness grows. Along with this, relationships change. There is less defense, less rigidity, less repetition of unconscious scenarios. What used to happen automatically now becomes a choice. From a psychological perspective, this movement provides real autonomy. Research shows that integrating the repressed is associated with reduced anxiety, greater emotional stability, and greater coherence between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. This isn't because conflicts disappear, but because they are no longer ignored and are consciously processed. But perhaps the most profound change occurs at the level of identity. The idea of an ideal self, flawless and free of contradictions, begins to lose its significance. In its place, something more complex and more real emerges. Accepting you're embracing the shadow means accepting that the human personality is not linear, but rather consists of opposites that coexist: strength and vulnerability, control and impulse, light and darkness. And it is precisely this acceptance that opens up new possibilities. Instead of expending energy to maintain an unrealistic self-image, one begins to invest in self-discovery and authentic development. The shadow ceases to be an obstacle and becomes a source of psychic energy that, once brought into conscious awareness, can be channeled into creativity, authenticity, and growth. Ultimately, Jung's concept is not about comfort, it is about transformation. It demands that we relinquish the illusion of total control and honestly confront our own complexity. And this leads to one final, inevitable question: if true change begins the moment you stop running away from yourself, what else is preventing you from seeing yourself in your entirety?